Daily Words of God.
When following God, people seldom pay attention to God's intentions and seldom take heed of God's thoughts and God's attitude toward man. You don't understand God's thoughts, so when asked questions involving God's intentions, involving God's disposition, you get into a muddle. You are deeply uncertain, and you either guess or gamble. What is this attitude? It proves this fact. Most people who believe in God regard Him as empty air, as indistinct. Why do I put it like that? Because every time you are faced with a matter, you don't know God's intentions. Why don't you know? It's not that you just don't know right now. Rather, from the beginning to the end, you don't know what God's attitude is toward this matter. In those times that you cannot see and you don't know God's attitude, have you pondered it over? Have you sought it? Have you communicated it? No. This confirms a fact. The God of your belief and the true God are not connected. You who believe in God only ponder your own will, only ponder your leader's will, and only ponder the superficial and doctrinal meaning of God's Word, but do not truly try to know and seek God's will at all. Isn't that how it is? The essence of this matter is awful. Over many years, I have seen lots of people who believe in God. What form does this belief take on? Some people believe in God as if He were empty air. These people have no answer to questions of God's existence because they can't feel or be aware of God's presence or absence, let alone clearly see or understand it. Subconsciously, these people think that God doesn't exist. Some others believe in God as if He were a man. These people believe that God is unable to do all of the things that they are unable to do, and that God should think however they think. This person's definition of God is an invisible and untouchable person. There's also a group of people who believe in God as if He were a puppet. These people believe that God has no emotions, that God is a statue. When faced with a matter, God has no attitude, no viewpoint, no ideas. He's at the mercy of man. People just believe however they want to believe. If they make Him great, He's great. If they make Him small, He's small. When people sin and need God's mercy, need God's tolerance, need God's love, then God should extend His mercy. These people think up a God in their own minds and make this God fulfill their demands and satisfy all of their desires. No matter when or where, and no matter what this person does, they will adopt this fancy in their treatment of God and their belief in God. There are even those who believe that God can save them after they have aggravated God's disposition. This is because they believe that God's love is boundless, God's disposition is righteous, and that no matter how people offend God, God won't remember any of it. Since man's faults, man's trespasses, and man's disobedience are momentary expressions of that person's disposition, God will give people chances and be tolerant and patient with them. God will still love them as before. So the hope of their salvation is still great. In fact, no matter how someone believes in God, so long as they are not seeking after the truth, then God holds a negative attitude toward them. This is because, while you're believing in God, maybe you treasure that book of God's Word. You study it every day. You read it every day. But you set aside the real God. You regard Him as empty air, regard Him as a person, and some of you simply regard Him as a puppet. Why do I put it this way? Because from how I see it, regardless of whether you're faced with a matter or encounter a circumstance, those things that exist in your subconscious, those things that are developed within, none of them have any connection with God's Word or seeking after the truth. You only know what you yourself are thinking, what your own viewpoints are, and then your own ideas, your own viewpoints are forced onto God. They become God's viewpoints, which are used as standards to be unwaveringly adhered to. Over time, proceeding like this puts you further and further away from God.